I'm Rachel Bennett, 35 years old, and this Christmas I was pulling into the driveway of the house I grew up in a place I hadn't set foot in for 5 long years. The porch light was still the same one my dad hung when I was in middle school, the same wreath on the door my mom had hot glued together at the church craft fair. But everything about me had changed. I wasn't the quiet, overlooked girl they used to talk over at dinner. This time I wasn't coming back empty-handed. In the trunk of my rental car was something they never saw coming, something I built while they weren't paying attention. Before I get into what happened next, drop a comment and tell me if you've ever returned home feeling like a stranger. And if you're listening on the road or cleaning up around the house, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. You're not alone in this. I grew up in a neighborhood just outside Denver, in a house where everything had a label, a schedule, and a purpose. My mom worked in hospital administration, and my dad was a corporate lawyer. Both high-achieving, disciplined people who believed success was earned through hard work and measurable results. They raised us on checklists and report cards, not bedtime stories or hugs. If you weren't the best at something, you weren't worth talking about. My older brother Brian was the standard. Straight A's, varsity athlete, already shadowing doctors by the time he could drive. Then came my younger sister Megan, full of charm and creativity, always the star of every school play, and somehow, even her mistakes came wrapped in praise. And then there was me, sandwiched between them, quiet, steady, always just there. I liked computers. I liked building things that worked when nothing else did, but that didn't get you attention in my house. When I showed my dad the first game I ever built at 13, he glanced at it and asked if I'd studied for my trig quiz. When I told my mom I wanted to take an intro to coding summer camp, she asked why I didn't want to try art like Megan. It was like being born with a voice no one heard. The only place I felt seen was behind a screen solving puzzles no one else understood. I taught myself late into the night while my siblings were being driven to practices, recitals, interviews. When I got accepted into Caltech with a partial scholarship for computer science, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally be proud. But at the dinner table that night, my father frowned and said, "It's not worth the debt. There's a perfectly decent state program closer to home." So I went anyway. I took out loans, worked shifts at the campus bookstore, and never looked back. After graduation, I moved to Seattle. They didn't ask why. Calls got fewer. Holidays passed with texts. I sent cards and gifts. They sent updates about Megan's art shows and Brian's residency. Not once did they ask what I was building. So I stopped offering. What they didn't know, what nobody in that house knew, was that in 5 years, I co-founded a company that built secure data systems for major hospital networks. What started in my studio apartment with 3 secondhand laptops was now valued at over $70 million. Hospitals trusted us. Investors called every week. The girl they used to call too quiet had built something real. But I didn't go home to show it off. I went because of my grandmother. Grandma Jean was the only one who ever asked how I was really doing. She sent me clippings of articles she thought I'd like mailed handwritten cards with stickers on the envelopes. That fall she called me and said, "Rachel, honey, come home this Christmas. I want to see you. Not for them, for me." And when she said that, I knew I couldn't stay away. So I was back, 5 years later, standing on the front steps with snow falling in soft spirals around me. The door opened. My mother gave me that familiar once-over, not a smile, just a judgment. "You look different," she said. "Have you lost weight? Or maybe gained some?" My dad followed with a half hug and a forced laugh. The prodigal daughter returns. Still working in that little computer thing, huh? They had no idea. As I walked inside, I told myself I wasn't here to prove anything. I wasn't that girl anymore. I had something to give, something that mattered. But whether they saw it or not, that was up to them. I didn't know it yet, but by the next morning, I'd be sitting under the Christmas tree watching every single person open a gift except me. And that's when everything started to change. They were all gathered in the kitchen by the time I came downstairs. My brother Brian was helping himself to coffee, Megan was showing off her engagement ring again, and my mother was hovering by the oven like it was a performance stage. I sat at the old oak table, the same one where every family dinner had taken place for as long as I could remember. I tried easing into the conversation. "I've been working on a new project," I said, casually hoping for an opening. "Our system helps hospitals keep patient data secure." "Rachel, could you pass the salt?" my mother asked, not looking up from the casserole dish she was garnishing. Then turning quickly to Megan, she added, "Now tell us about the venue you're thinking of. Was it the Lakeside Pavilion or the country club I handed over the salt?" Whatever I'd started to say trailed off like steam from a mug no one wanted to sip. For the next 20 minutes, the conversation was all about Megan's engagement party. Guest lists, floral arrangements, color themes. I sipped my coffee and let it wash over me the same way I used to when I was younger, waiting for someone to notice I was still in the room. Later that afternoon, my father brought up Brian's latest cardiology proposal. The hospital board's interested in moving forward. It could mean a 7-figure grant, he said, pride stitched into every word. I was mid-sentence trying again to explain a new expansion at my company when he glanced at his watch and turned toward my brother. "They'd be crazy not to greenlight your plan, son. You're exactly the kind of leader that place needs." And just like that, I was 14 again. Quiet at the end of the table, nodding and smiling while everyone else got the spotlight. By the time dinner rolled around, I noticed something odd. My mom was setting the table with 6 place settings, not 7. I walked over. "Looks like one's missing." She blinked at the plates, then laughed. "Oh, I guess I forgot to count you." Just habit, I still set the table for the ones who come home more often. She added a plate as if it were no big deal, but I stood there for a second longer than I needed to. It didn't feel like an accident. Not really. When we sat down to eat, Brian had his favorite potatoes. Megan got the veggie medley she always loved, and even Brian's wife had a gluten-free option. My plate had the green bean casserole, the one I'd hated since I was a kid. "I'll pass on that, thanks," I said. "Still picky?" My mother sighed, placing the serving spoon back. "I forgot. There's bread if you're still hungry." After the meal, my dad suggested the men relax in the living room while the women handled the cleanup. The roles hadn't changed, apparently. In the kitchen, I tried to chat with my mom and Megan while rinsing dishes. "So how's your tech job going?" Megan asked, leaning on the counter. I barely got 2 sentences in before my mom cut across. "Rachel, no, those plates go in after the rinse cycle. You'll clog the drain with that food still on them. You were always careless with chores. Good thing your job doesn't depend on your domestic skills." I kept washing, nodding politely, the edges of my smile fraying a little. That night, I went upstairs to unpack. My room, the one I grew up in, was barely recognizable. Boxes of decorations and old files were stacked against the walls. Coats were piled across the bed. My childhood posters were gone. The corkboard where I'd pinned my first programming award had been stripped clean, leaving only a faded rectangle on the wall. I stood in the doorway for a minute before pushing the coats aside. Later, I opened the hall closet looking for hangers and spotted a box labeled Rachel's School Stuff. I sat on the floor, pulled it out, and opened the lid. Inside were my certificates, coding trophies, even a laminated newspaper article from when I won the state tech competition in high school. Bent corners dust and a few spider webs. It wasn't just storage. It was what they'd done with me, too. Packaged up, filed away, out of sight. That night I called Sophia. "They haven't changed," I said, sitting cross-legged on the bed that no longer felt like mine. "I'm still the middle kid who doesn't matter. They don't even ask what I do." Brian talked about his new practice for nearly an hour. No one asked me a single thing. Sophia didn't hesitate. "Tell them about the company. about Tech Nexus. They might finally give you the credit you deserve. I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. That's not why I'm here. I don't want their praise because I made something big. I want them to see me because I'm their daughter. I get that, she said quietly. But don't forget you came for your grandma. You don't need their approval anymore, Rachel. You know who you are. I stayed on the line with her a few more minutes. After I hung up, I sat in the dark with the light from the hallway spilling into the room. For a moment, I wondered if it would have been easier to just stay in Seattle, skip the whole thing. But then I remembered why I'd come. Christmas Eve was louder. The whole extended family arrived, cousins, aunts, uncles, my dad's brother and his kids, my mom's sister and her family, and finally, my grandmother. She walked in wearing her thick wool coat and smiled like the sun had followed her indoors. "There's my girl," she said, pulling me in for a real hug. "You look wonderful. Look at you, so grown, so radiant." I smiled, and for the first time all week, it felt genuine. The living room buzzed with chatter. I tried joining a few conversations answered when my cousin Greg asked what I'd been working on, but by the third sentence, his eyes glazed over. "So basically," he said, "you play with computers all day." That's cute. Must be nice not having real responsibilities. This from a man who still worked part-time at his dad's office. I moved away and ended up by the fireplace. Aunt Linda found me. "No ring yet?" she asked, glancing at my hand. "I'm not married, no." "Well, Rachel, 35. You know your options narrow after a while. Megan's having her second soon, and she's only 30. Before I could answer, my mom joined in. "Rachel's always been career-focused. Not everyone's cut out for family life." I looked at both of them. "I'm building something meaningful. And I'm dating, I just haven't found the right person." "Well, you don't always get the luxury of waiting," Aunt Linda said. "Beggars can't be choosers." I excused myself before I said something I'd regret. Back in the kitchen, I found Grandma Jean struggling with the smartphone Brian had given her. I sat beside her, took the phone gently from her hands, and peeled off the screen protector. "It still has the sticker on it," I said, smiling. "Let's get this set up right." For the next 20 minutes, I showed her how to use it, big text-easy shortcuts and voicemail playback. "You always make things simple," she said, squeezing my hand. "Tell me about your work. Are you happy?" That question, so simple, so rare, nearly took the breath out of me. I told her everything. Not about the money, about the hospitals we were helping, the systems we built, the people we protected. She nodded, smiling the whole time. "Your grandfather would be so proud. He always said you had a different spark. Not lesser, just different." We were interrupted when my mom called everyone in for dinner. On the way to the dining room, I overheard my parents in the hallway. "Brian's practice is doing incredibly well," my dad said. "That research grant is huge. And Megan's fiancé has such a solid background," my mom replied. "He's connected, he's stable. They'll go far." "At least 2 of our kids made smart choices," my dad said. "Rachel's still doing her computer thing, living alone. I just wonder where we went wrong with her." I stood just around the corner staring at the wood trim along the hallway. Their words didn't hurt the way they might have once. They landed differently now, like the final confirmation of something I'd suspected all along. At dinner, my father stood to give the traditional family prayer. He thanked the Lord for Brian's work in medicine, for Megan's engagement, for the grandkids, the home, the year. He never said my name. I didn't mention it. Halfway through the meal, I excused myself to the bathroom. I looked at my reflection. The same face I'd seen pitch to investors, lead conferences, sign million-dollar deals. Now, trying not to flinch in front of the people who raised her. I could have left that night. Packed my things and said there was an emergency at work. Instead, I turned off the faucet, dried my hands, and walked back out. I hadn't come this far to disappear again. Tomorrow was Christmas morning, the gift exchange. Christmas morning in my parents' living room still followed the same pattern it had since I was a teenager. By 8 o'clock, everyone had gathered in pajamas, slippers, and mismatched robes. The fireplace was going Christmas music played low from the speaker in the corner, and my mom's hot chocolate, thick with whipped cream, steamed in matching ceramic mugs. I took my usual place on the window bench, just a few steps removed from the rest of the seating like always. From there I could see the whole room. Brian and his wife sat on the couch with their 2 kids bouncing beside them. Megan was curled up with her fiancé on the floor by the tree. My parents stood near the mantel, smiling relaxed. My dad cleared his throat and put on his Santa hat. That was the one silly tradition he allowed himself, calling out names and handing out gifts one by one. "Let's see who Santa visited this year," he said, picking up the first box. It started with the youngest, as it always did. My niece tore into a giant pink box and pulled out a kid-sized electric car she could actually sit in and drive. My nephew got a massive Lego set, 2 books, and a new winter coat with a dinosaur print. His little hands were moving so fast, the wrapping paper flew like confetti. Next came Megan. From our parents, she received a designer purse to match your ring, my mom said proudly. From Brian and his wife, she opened a cashmere scarf in soft cream and a set of high-end skincare products. Her fiancé, Tom, was handed a sleek leather briefcase, a bottle of aged whiskey, and box seats to an upcoming game, his first Christmas with us, and already he had more under the tree than I did. Brian and his wife each got several large boxes. Kitchen gadgets they'd asked for, a weekend spa trip, monogrammed robes. Brian unwrapped a new set of golf clubs. For hospital networking events, my dad joked, "Gotta keep that swing fresh, son." My parents exchanged gifts, last diamond earrings for my mother, a leather jacket for my father. They both looked pleased, clinking their mugs before my dad returned to the tree for the final stretch. More gifts were handed to cousins-in-laws and even extended family. My Aunt Linda received a new purse and a framed family photo. Uncle Ray got a pair of noise-canceling headphones. Grandma Jean had a small stack slippers, a bathrobe, a devotional calendar. I waited. One by one, each box under the tree was opened. Paper crinkled bows were tossed aside. Kids squealed. I sat quietly on the window seat, watching the pile shrink. And then it was gone. Not a single tag with my name. My niece looked around, her small brow furrowed. "Did Aunt Rachel get any presents?" The room went still, not frozen in shock, just quiet in that familiar, uncomfortable way. A few glances passed between relatives, then toward the empty space near the tree. I looked at my mother. She gave a short laugh and waved a hand. "Oh, we forgot you weren't coming until the last minute. After so long away, we weren't sure you'd be here." My father added, "We'll pick something up tomorrow. The stores will be open again. Of course we'll get you something." Aunt Linda, possibly out of pity, began digging through her oversized handbag. She pulled out a green candle still in its gift bag. "I got this at a white elephant thing at work. You're welcome to have it if you'd like." "No, thank you," I said quietly. "That's kind of you, but I'm all right." For a moment, no one spoke. Then my mother stood up and clapped her hands lightly. "Okay, who's hungry? I've got the French toast casserole ready, and the bacon should be crisp by now." And just like that, it ended. The room shifted toward breakfast. Conversation started again. Wrapping paper was gathered into a trash bag. Someone turned the music up a little louder. I stayed by the window for a minute longer. It wasn't the gifts. It wasn't the candle. It was the ease with which they'd forgotten me. As if I were an afterthought, a guest who had shown up without notice, not their daughter. Still sitting with that quiet, I stood and helped clear a few dishes. My mother handed me a bowl of fresh berries to set on the table. I did it without saying a word. In that moment, I didn't feel angry. I felt still. After breakfast, I stepped away and went upstairs. My suitcase was by the bed. I sat down beside it, smoothed the blanket, and took out a slim envelope I'd packed the night before. I ran my fingers over the seal for a second. Then I slipped it into my coat pocket. The house was full of laughter and clinking plates. I could hear Brian teasing his kids, my mom praising the texture of her casserole, and Megan's voice floating above the rest as she retold the story of her proposal. But somewhere beneath all that sound, something had shifted. A line had been crossed, not loud, not dramatic, but final in its own way. They had shown me where I stood. Brunch was just starting when I came back downstairs. The table was already set eggs, bacon, fruit, and that same French toast casserole my mom made every Christmas morning. Megan and her fiancé were showing photos on his phone. Brian was cutting pancakes for his daughter while she bounced in her seat. My dad poured orange juice into tall glasses, moving from person to person with ease. I sat down at the edge of the table, the envelope tucked inside my cardigan pocket. No one seemed to notice. Or maybe they did and chose not to ask. The gift exchange from earlier hadn't been mentioned again. It was as if it had never happened. The room had moved on without pause. My father raised his mimosa for an impromptu toast. To family and to another year of blessings, he said, lifting his glass. To Brian's upcoming research funding to Megan's engagement, and to this beautiful meal prepared by the best woman I know. Everyone clinked their glasses and took a sip. I waited a beat, then reached into my pocket and set the envelope on the table in front of me. It wasn't loud. I didn't clear my throat. I just waited for the quiet to catch up. When it did, I spoke. Since we're sharing good news, I said there's something I'd like to show you. A few heads turned. Megan looked up from her phone. Brian set his fork down. My father tilted his head slightly, brows raised. I slid the envelope across the table and pulled out a magazine. I turned it toward them, slowly letting the cover face the room. There I was, my photo on the front under the headline, Healthcare's Rising Tech Stars, How Rachel Bennett's Team is Changing Patient Security Nationwide. I kept my voice even. This is TechNexus, I said, the company I co-founded 4 years ago. We build cybersecurity systems for hospitals. Right now, our platform protects patient data for 17 major health networks, including the one Brian works for. No one spoke. I took out the second sheet of paper. It was a printed acquisition offer from a national tech firm with a valuation figure in the lower right corner. We received this offer 2 weeks ago. $75 million, I said. We haven't accepted. I'm leaning toward expanding independently, possibly launching internationally next year. I placed the document next to the magazine, then rested my hands in my lap. The silence shifted. My mother's mouth parted slightly, her eyes on the page. My father stared down at the offer like it was written in another language. Megan looked at me, then back at the photo. Brian reached across the table and picked up the document. "This is real," he asked. That's you on the cover." "Yes," I said. "It's been my full-time work for the last 5 years." My grandmother was the first to speak with feeling. "Rachel," she said softly, her hand over her heart. "Oh, honey, that's incredible. Your grandfather would have been so proud." My mother leaned forward, recovering first. "Well," she said, her tone bright and quick, "we always knew you had a good head for technology. I told everyone at work just last week that you were doing something impressive." I didn't correct her. My dad cleared his throat. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Something like this. It's life-changing." "No one asked," I said, and when I tried the conversation usually changed. Megan reached for the magazine. "You really built all of this?" she asked. "It's not a joint thing. You're the one who started it." "I had 2 co-founders," I said, "but the idea came from me." There was a pause. Brian handed the paper back and gave a slow nod. "It's impressive," he said. "Really? That's a serious offer. You must be—" He stopped. "You must be doing well." "I'm comfortable," I said. "But it's not just about the money." I took another envelope from my lap, this one smaller, unsealed. I opened it and placed a third page on the table. It was a printed press release set to go out the following week. In honor of Grandma Jean, I said we're donating $1 million to Portland Central's pediatric wing, in the Anderson family name. My grandmother reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "The same hospital where your grandfather volunteered," she whispered. "He would have cried." The room was quiet again, but this time it felt different, not just awkward, unsettled. My mom reached for my arm gently. "We're proud of you," she said. "We always knew you had it in you." I looked at her, not angry, just steady. "You didn't know, and that's okay. I just wanted you to see it now." Conversation restarted, but it moved differently. My dad began asking questions about venture funding. My mother turned to a cousin and said, "Did you see this? Rachel's company is being featured in a national magazine?" Brian kept glancing down at the document, thoughtful. Megan stayed quiet, flipping through the pages again. As the table settled into its new rhythm, I glanced at my grandmother. Her eyes were still on me. She gave one short nod. I knew what it meant. She saw me. And for now, that was enough. The room hadn't quite settled when I reached for the small stack of white envelopes beside my plate. I held them in both hands, then passed them across the table one by one. "I actually brought something for each of you," I said quietly. I was just waiting for the right time. They weren't flashy, just plain envelopes, each labeled with a name in neat black ink. One for my father, one for my mother, one each for Brian, Megan, and their spouses. My niece and nephew had theirs tucked into a shared envelope marked with bright red stickers. And the last one with the soft gold seal I placed gently in front of Grandma Jean. Each person paused before opening theirs, glancing around the table. I nodded once, giving them the go-ahead. Inside were personalized gift certificates, though calling them that didn't quite do them justice. "For you," I said to my dad, "a full smart home security system, custom designed. Includes professional installation, account setup, and direct access to my team for any support." He looked up, surprised, turning the paper in his hand. "For Mom," I continued, "we're digitizing your entire photo collection, every album, every VHS, every loose print. And we'll build you a searchable online archive with tagging and voice access. You've been saying for years you wanted to organize them." My mom blinked at the paper, then smiled faintly. "I didn't even know you knew about that," she said. "Brian," I said, "next you'll get early access to our new scheduling platform. It's designed for multi-provider networks like yours. It'll cut down your team's administrative load by about 40%. We're still testing, but I'd like you to be part of the closed beta." He nodded, slowly scanning the card. "Megan," I said, handing her envelope to her directly, "you'll have full access to our wedding planning suite. You'll be able to sync your guest list, track RSVPs, vendor contracts, and even design your own interactive seating charts. It's not public yet." She smiled and tilted her head. "This is real, like, made by your company?" "Yes," I said. "And it's all yours." I turned to the kids next. "For Olivia and Henry, lifetime access to our educational platform. It comes with interactive learning modules, STEM kits, and a prepaid balance to cover summer workshops, tech camps, whatever they're interested in." Brian's wife leaned over to take a closer look at their envelope. "And for you," I said softly to Grandma Jean, "a new tablet preloaded with health monitoring tools designed for seniors. It comes with a direct line to my team for setup and troubleshooting, and we're installing large font, voice-guided features for medication tracking and communication." She looked at the card, then looked up at me. Her hand covered mine again without a word. "These aren't off the shelf," I said. "Each one is something I designed or helped design because I knew it would make your lives easier, safer, or more connected. That's what I do. I solve problems." Silence again. Not the awkward kind from earlier. This one had weight to it. Everyone at the table seemed to be absorbing what had just been handed to them. "I don't need anything in return," I said, my voice even. "I just wanted you to see who I really am. Not the version you assumed, not what you hoped I'd become, just me." Grandma Jean dabbed at her eyes with the edge of her napkin. Her fingers trembled as she refolded the envelope and placed it neatly in front of her. My dad was the first to break the silence. "This is a lot," he said. "All this tech. I didn't know you'd gotten this far." I gave a small nod. "You should have brought us in earlier," he said. "I have contacts, investors, legal counsel. You know we could have helped open some doors." "I found the ones I needed," I said, "and I learned how to open them myself." He looked away, tapping his finger against the edge of his coffee mug. My mom picked up her envelope again. "You really remembered all those old photo boxes?" she asked. "They were stacked in the upstairs closet," I said. "Same place they were 5 years ago." Her eyes dropped. She didn't respond right away. Megan leaned across the table slightly. "That wedding tool. Is this really going to work for guest lists? Because we've had nothing but problems with ours. It's built for events twice the size of yours," I said. "So yes, it'll work." She smiled again. "Thanks. Seriously, that's kind of amazing." Brian didn't say much. He glanced at his envelope once more, then folded it and slid it into his back pocket. "I'll look into it," he said. "One of the kids asked if they could open their gift now. My mom told them they'd look at it after lunch." Conversations slowly returned to the table lighter now. The tension from earlier had softened, though the air still held something unspoken. My father asked 1 or 2 business questions, nothing too pressing. My mother went back to describing the Christmas pie she'd made from scratch. Megan leaned in again to ask about colors for the dashboard screen. But across from me, Grandma Jean stayed quiet. After everyone had eaten, she stood slowly from her chair and came around the table to where I sat. She placed both hands on my shoulders, leaned down and whispered, "You did something brave today, sweetheart. Not just building all that, but bringing it here." I didn't say anything. I just reached up and squeezed her wrist gently. The kids were already pulling their parents toward the tree again, excited to show off their new toys. Megan was scrolling through her phone, pointing something out to Tom. My dad and Brian had drifted toward the back porch, but as I helped clear the plates from the table, I caught sight of the envelopes, each one still sitting on someone's place setting, each one now opened. And I knew, even before the next conversations began, that nothing would go back to the way it was before. The rest of the afternoon passed in that strange mix of motion and quiet, the kind that settles after something big has been said out loud. The television played a holiday movie in the background. The kids raced around the living room with a remote-controlled dinosaur, their laughter bouncing off the walls. The grown-ups had splintered into smaller groups, some talking, some cleaning, some just sitting with their thoughts. I stepped out onto the back porch to get some air. A few minutes later, the door creaked behind me. My father stepped out holding 2 mugs. "Still like your coffee black?" he asked, offering me one. I took it, nodded. "Thanks." He leaned on the railing, staring out over the frozen yard. For a while, we didn't speak. Then he cleared his throat. "You know, when I saw that magazine cover, I couldn't believe it. Not because I didn't think you were capable, but, well, I just didn't know what you'd been doing all these years." I let the quiet stretch. He continued anyway. "You should have told me sooner," he said. "Back when you were starting out. I've got contacts, business people, investors. I could have helped." "I had to figure it out myself," I said. "I could have opened doors for you. I opened the ones I needed." He didn't answer right away, just nodded slowly, then took a long sip from his mug. "We should talk sometime," he said, trying to sound casual. "Maybe about setting up a family investment. You know, keep things in the circle. Our investor round closed a while ago," I said gently. "But I appreciate the interest." He gave a short laugh, more breath than sound. Well, if you change your mind. Inside, the light from the kitchen glowed across the windows. I could see my mother rearranging something on the dessert table. Later, while I helped her bring out slices of pie, she picked up the thread. I always knew you had a gift with those machines, she said. Remember that book I gave you when you were 12? The one about programming. I didn't correct her. The book had been from Grandma Jean. My mother had suggested a makeup set that year. You were always different, she said, wiping a smudge from a dessert plate. Not worse. Just not like the others. I suppose I didn't always understand how your mind worked. I kept slicing the pie. You've made quite a name for yourself now, she added. That's something to be proud of. I handed her a plate. Thank you. She took it with both hands, looked at me for a long second, then turned back toward the table. Brian stayed quiet most of the evening. After dessert, he cornered me by the hallway. So that company valuation, he asked, keeping his voice low. That number's real, $75 million. That's the current offer. He looked at me, then at the floor. So, your stake is what half a significant share, I said. He nodded slowly. And you really built all of this. We started in my apartment, I said. Me and 2 others. We coded through the nights. We pitched, we failed, we rebuilt. He crossed his arms. I always thought you were kind of drifting. I didn't respond. That's what Mom and Dad said, he added, that you didn't have direction. I looked at him. I had direction. You just weren't looking where I was going. He didn't argue, just gave one of those half shrugs and stepped aside to let me pass. Of all the conversations that day, the one I hadn't expected came later that night. The house had quieted, the kids were asleep, the dishes were stacked. I'd gone upstairs to change when I heard a soft knock at the door. It was Megan. She stepped inside holding the folded envelope I'd given her earlier. I didn't say much today, she said. I just needed to take it in. I nodded. It was a lot. She sat on the edge of the bed the way she used to when we were kids. Were we really that bad? She asked, looking down at her hands. You weren't cruel, I said, just absent. Like I was in the same room, but no one really looked at me. She let the silence sit before answering. I thought you were just the quiet one, the one who didn't need attention the way Brian and I did. Maybe I stopped asking for it. She looked up at me. I'm sorry. If I ever made you feel less than, I didn't know. I sat beside her. I'd like to know the adult version of you, not just the sister who got all the attention. She smiled. I'd like that too. Maybe we could do a call once a month. Just us. I nodded. That would be nice. She stood up, then paused at the door. You're a lot stronger than I ever realized. After she left, I turned off the light and sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the quiet hum of the heater. Something had shifted. Not everything had healed. Not every word had been said. But the air in the house was different. And that was enough for now. Morning light filtered in through the blinds of the old storage room, catching dust in the air as I folded the last sweater into my suitcase. My flight back to Seattle was later that afternoon, but I'd already let everyone know I'd be leaving early. I'd told them it was for work meetings, early prep for the new quarter. No one questioned it. The truth was quieter than that. I just knew I'd said everything I needed to say. I zipped the suitcase closed and sat on the edge of the bed, glancing once around the room. The coat pile was gone now, folded and stacked neatly in the corner. The box labeled Rachel's school stuff still sat open in the closet. I didn't bother to close it. I wasn't taking any of that with me. There was a soft knock on the door. Grandma Jean stepped inside, wrapped in her navy wool cardigan, her cane tucked under one arm. Heading out already, she asked, though she didn't sound surprised. I nodded. Feels like the right time. She walked slowly to the chair in the corner, easing herself into it. The room was quiet for a long moment. "You know," she said, settling her hands in her lap, "your grandfather used to say, 'Family is like a mirror. Some show you who you really are. Others just reflect what they want to see.'" I looked at her. She met my eyes. "You've always been my clearest mirror, Grandma." She reached across and patted my hand. "Because I saw you, not just what you did, but who you were and who you were becoming." I felt the weight of those words settle into the space between us. "What you did yesterday," she said, "not just the success, but the way you stood in it." That took courage. I didn't say anything. She wasn't waiting for reassurance. "Your parents may never understand the full picture," she continued. "They love you in their way, but they've always been chasing something else. You're not part of that measurement." I nodded slowly. I'm not expecting more than they can give. I just needed to be seen clearly at least once. She smiled. "And now you have been. We made plans for her to visit Seattle in the spring. I'd arrange it all, a direct flight, someone to help with the airport transfer." She mentioned wanting to see the ocean again. When she stood to leave, she paused at the door. "Your grandfather would have been proud," she said. "Not for the money, not for the headlines, but because you stayed kind and you told the truth." Downstairs, my parents were standing near the front door. My mom held a wrapped box, the kind with the department store sticker still on the side. She handed it to me quickly. "We couldn't let you leave without something," she said with a practiced smile. "It's just a little thing." Inside was a designer scarf. Expensive, tasteful, and impersonal. I thanked her anyway. My dad offered a firm handshake and a few words about keeping in touch. "Let us know how the expansion goes," he said. "We'd love to hear updates. Maybe even stay involved somehow." I nodded. "I'll keep you posted. I mean, not just the business," he added awkwardly. "Let us know how you're doing. In general." "I'd like that," I said. "If it's about more than updates." They looked at each other as if considering that for the first time. I stepped out into the cold, with my suitcase trailing behind me, the front steps dusted with fresh snow. The drive to the airport was quiet. I didn't rush. When I landed, Sophia was already waiting at the terminal. Back already, she asked, pulling me into a hug. "You made it." "Yeah," I said. "I made it." She took the handle of my suitcase and led me to the car. "So, how'd it go?" I smiled. Complicated, but necessary. The weeks after I came home passed quietly. No dramatic phone calls, no sweeping apologies, but the rhythm of things had shifted. My parents started calling a little more often. The conversations were short, sometimes stilted, but they were reaching out. My dad still asked about quarterly projections or market strategy, but once in a while he'd ask how my week had been. My mom sent me a link to an article about women in tech and added a note that said, "Thought of you." Megan kept her promise. We set up a standing video call on the first Sunday of each month. Sometimes we talked about work, sometimes just about books or weekend plans. For the first time in our lives, we were talking to each other, not around each other. Brian kept more distance. Our texts were occasional and polite. I stopped expecting more. Grandma Jean and I spoke every week, sometimes twice. She asked about my team, my new condo, the volunteer coding classes I'd started for girls in underserved schools. She said they reminded her of me, quiet, curious, steady. I told her they reminded me too. Spring came, and she flew out to Seattle. I booked her a private car and had her favorite tea waiting in the guest room. She sat by the window the first evening and said, "I never imagined seeing you live like this, but somehow it makes perfect sense." We spent the week talking about things we'd never said out loud before, about her own childhood, about my grandfather's quiet ways, about the patterns that traveled through families without anyone ever naming them. She told me understanding them didn't excuse them, but it helped loosen their hold. That stuck with me. So I started therapy. Not to untangle blame, but to sort out the places where those old voices still lived. The ones that whispered I had to earn love to deserve it, that being unseen meant being unworthy. I began learning how to hear them and then how to quiet them. 6 months later, when the next holiday season rolled around, I didn't go back to Denver. I invited Grandma Jean to spend Christmas with me instead. Megan asked if she and her husband could join. We decorated the tree together, cooked dinner side by side, played cards late into the night, laughing the way we never used to. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was simple, honest, and for the first time in a long time it felt like family. I kept a respectful distance from the rest. Calls, yes. Kindness, yes. But no more shrinking myself to fit back into places I'd outgrown. That was the real gift. Not the success or the recognition, but the quiet freedom of knowing I no longer had to perform to be valued. What I built wasn't just a company. It was a life, one rooted in clarity, in chosen connection, in truth. And if you've ever felt invisible around the people who were supposed to know you best, I want you to hear this. You don't need to be recognized to be real. You don't have to prove yourself to be worthy. The people who truly see you, whether they share your blood or not, will never need convincing. Thank you for listening to my story. If it reminded you of something in your own life, I hope you'll share it in the comments, or pass this along to someone who might need it. And if you're still waiting for someone to see your worth, remember, it starts with you.